Welcome to Let's Talk About Love Stories from Everywhere. I'm your host, Jill Ferguson, and today I have an extra special guest, Marcos Redondo, who is president of Zenith Prep Academy, if you couldn't tell by the stuff behind him. First of all, your last name means round. And,
It does.
And you are not by any means round.
Well, it's
right?
funny. It's very kind of you to say, but actually, there have been a couple of periods in my life where I was round, and
Oh,
I had some significant obesity as a child between the ages of 10 and 16 before I learned about health consciousness and healthy eating and healthy habits on my own, and transformed that into a running career and marathons and ultra distance run events and all that.
so
But
that is why you started to run?
not because of the name, although I'm sure many people enjoyed using my name as a reference to that. Part of it actually was just needing to find a way to be able to do all the things that I thought I could and knew that I could, but without the handicap of my coping mechanism at the time, which was sugar and caffeine and calories and things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah. But actually, it's a funny thing about my name. It like there's multiple ways of translating almost anything, and although Redondo does mean round, there was also one translation that meant to go forth and return. And I always really liked that once I started doing these long distance events because it was about always being able to find your way back home
Yeah.
from whatever event I started.
So there's a main arterial road near my house, just like 2 blocks away, and it's Redondo Avenue.
Oh, is it really?
And the new definition that you just gave me makes so much more sense for that arterial roadway.
Yes, yes.
So that's great to know. I like that.
Absolutely.
I love learning new things. And
Yeah.
new
And I always like
translations of
finding new
language.
ways of identifying things. So it worked out.
So your family is from Cuba, right?
Correct.
And I think that as Americans, sometimes we have kind of a romanticized idea of what Cuba's like, right? As a country. And, I think we think, well, there's some fabulous fiction that's set there, right? But we feel like maybe it's set in the country's still kind of in the 1950s as far as like cars and
Exactly.
different things go. And what is it really like to be Cuban, to be Cuban-American? Because I know that you were born in the U.S. And
Yes, it's interesting that you bring that up. I was very sheltered from my own heritage because growing up in Miami, Condoleezza Rice once made a pas or faux pas, depending on your perspective. After having visited Miami, she had a public speaking event where she said she had finally returned back to the United States. And depending on your perspective, your facial reaction, some people thought that may have been a little bit too far. Some people knew it was in jest, but regardless, Miami has always been slightly different. And I say always in the sense of the last 75 years. Pre 1960, pre 1950, it was a very, very slow backwater area that was mostly farmland and so on and so forth. But really, after the 1960s, it started to take on a very Hispanic identity, and not even a Hispanic identity because it was a Cuban identity. And Cuba, as an isolated island, had a very different history than most of Latin and the Caribbean America in the 20th century. So growing up as a son of a Cuban family and Cuban-American, I had a lot of Cuban exposure from many streets being labeled in Spanish, many restaurants labeling in Spanish. So it was very unique in that regard. But two quick stories, if I may. One, I remember having a conversation with my maternal grandmother, who was a matriarch and a huge inspiration for myself and my family. And I was 18 years old, sort of doing an oral history. It was great to be able to listen to her about that moment in time that you alluded to. The classic cars, sort of the laid back guayaberas, the very breathable cotton fabric shirts and the beaches and all of those types of things. But it's funny because she had that memory and had no point of reference, right? So for her, that was the present view of Cuba, which was her present when she was forced to flee. Because my family were like many who chose to flee Cuba after the communist revolution there. And then I'll give you a more modern one. I was dating someone many years ago, back in 2009, and she was a double PhD, one from Yale, one from Harvard, one of the smartest people I've ever met. She was going to Cuba to do a sociological study. And it was a point of contention in our young budding relationship because I told her it wasn't going to be a really good experience. And this was coming from a lot of firsthand accounts I had received from people who had fled more recently in the 90s and the early 2000s with Peter Pan and Pedro Pan and a few other organizations. So about 3.5 weeks after she went, I received an email, and I still have it to this day, but it wasn't an email to me. It was the first email she had been allowed to send because it was restricted access at the time in the country. And it was sent to her parents and to her friends and to her family. And it was just one long chain email. And the only thing that she said to me was, Marcos, this part of the message is for you. You were right. We'll talk later. And not to make light of that experience, but one of the things that she witnessed was a distant relative of hers had to have an amputation because there was a lack of iodine. Not a lack of medical know-how, not a lack of the surgical tools or necessity of a basic medical ingredient. And again, I'm not trying to demonize Cuba either, but I think in part because of their economic situation post-Soviet fall and relations with the United States, and you're talking about an agricultural crop that tourism can only take you so far as an economic development. Yeah. And not to keep going on this too far, but hopefully I've been able to paint, perceptually there are so many different views that people have from Cuba, but for many Cuban exiles or descendants of Cuban exiles, it is a still romanticized view or this home that you never actually want to go back to. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I think it's, as humans, we're really good about holding two opposing viewpoints and feelings, right, within us about the same subject matter even.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can be romanticized about it and still not want to experience it.
Correct.
Present, right?
And that's my thing. I think I told you this previously. Like I plan to go. I need to have firsthand experience for myself, but out of respect for my father, it's going to be a few years before I do.
Yeah. So you talked about how you had kind of a career in running. What did that look like?
So my poor mother, and I realize this with my two young children who are 5 and 3 now. My mother has this story that she told my wife. She's told many people that she's met throughout the years. At about 10 and a half months, I stood up. My mother and father thought I was going to be taking my first steps, and I ran head forward into a wall. Oh. And yes, and so I didn't walk, I ran, and the poor woman was chasing me ever since. So I'm not even too ashamed to admit that I had to have a little foam helmet on for a little while because I was running into table corners and all sorts of things. So I've always been very active, and running is something my father has done for almost 40 years straight. And it's something I internalized from him. Endurance is such a beautiful thing to me, not stamina, but actually the idea of just longevity and just being able to go. And so despite my health issues from the ages of 10 to 16, give or take, I was always able to do things for a long time. Staying up late playing video games, staying up late watching TV, staying up late reading a book. The first time I read The Fellowship of the Ring, I didn't put it down. I just kept reading it. And so there was just this sense of just perpetuity for me. And with running, it became a sort of, yes, physical health, but it was a form of meditation. It was a way for me to make peace with nature. It was a way to challenge what people perceived as limits. So, I ran 26 miles, and then I started going to triathlons. I did an Ironman, so then I had to figure out what was a 100-mile race look like. I did an Ultraman competition, it was a 3-day ultra competition, and then eventually back in 2011 for a family, serendipitously I got involved with. They had a 2-year-old who had a rare form of brain cancer. I did a charity run where I ran from Key West up to the Florida-Georgia border in 9.5 days. I just ran like 65 miles a day by myself. So running has always been a way for me to bring it back to the center, whether it was physical health, whether it was a way of detoxing stress, a way to meditate or think about my life or about current events. I love it. I'm obsessed with it.
Mhm. So you're still running every day, every few days?
Funny you say that. I am now on my sixth day in a row of running.
Okay.
I think the other thing about running to me is that I have never had a dimmer switch. I am very much an on off type of person in everything I can do in my life. And so once I met my wife and we had a marriage and things like that, I ran and then I had kids. And briefly, if I may, the December 24th, I was on like a, I don't know, 35, 40 mile bike ride after having run 10 or 15 miles in the morning. I was planning on getting back into ultra events with my firstborn. I actually was hit by a car. And I had,
Oh my gosh.
it was pretty bad. I had to have reconstructive shoulder surgery. And I'll be very honest. I saw this even in an online article a couple of days ago where people say that, you get more tired when you have children, but I just feel like it's all relative. Well, having done ultra endurance events,
Mhm.
I can tell you nothing has made me more exhausted than being a parent. Not just 100%. And we're considering having a third because we're masochists. But and massive props to people who can parent many many children. But I'm also trying to find balance again. And you and I talked about this with the work that I do and sort of all the things I try and pour myself into. But yes, my goal is to go back into ultra running again here as a father as well.
Did you buy one of those running strollers? The jogging strollers?
Okay, Jill, do you mind if I tell you another brief story here?
No, of course not.
I pushed a stroller. I should have said this. When I ran from Key West to Georgia, I pushed a stroller the entire 570 miles. Um, I was very close friends with a family-owned running store in Miami. It was called Footworks. And I walked into that store one day. They knew me very well from all the running events and things like that. And I saw a young woman there and I asked for her help. And she said, "How can I help you?" "Well, I'm here to buy a baby stroller." She's like, "Well, how old is your baby?" I don't have one." "Oh, how far along is your wife?" I'm like, "I don't have a wife." "Why are you buying a baby stroller?" And I told her what she was doing, or what I was doing. And funny enough, I walked out of that store and she turned around and announced to everyone in that store, "I'm going to marry that man one day." Not knowing that I knew half the people who worked there, and me not knowing that less than 2 years later she would be my wife.
Oh my gosh,
It's
wow.
it's a ridiculously cheesy,
No, I
romantic,
love it.
but it's the truth. I met my wife buying a baby stroller, and we did not see each other for 11 months after that initial day. I went on to do the race. I went into the store occasionally, never saw her, and then 11 months later we ran into each other. Within 3 months after that, we were dating, and within 3 months after that, I asked her to marry me, and within 3 months after that, we had eloped. So,
And did
yeah,
you keep the baby stroller all the time until
I
you had your first one?
still run with it. I still run with it with my children today.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What an amazing story. I
yeah.
love it.
It was
Absolutely love it.
completely out of nowhere. But yeah, it's a beautiful story. I'm very happy to be able to share it.
And at that time when you guys met, you were teaching school?
Yes, so I was still a teacher at that point. I was doing some work with the College Board on some of their AP courses, like World History, which
Mhm.
eventually became AP Modern World History, and a few other things. But I was still a teacher at the time, and shortly thereafter, my wife, who was just graduating college, she became a teacher as well.
So what made you go into education? Or how did
Oh
you find
gosh.
that path?
Yes. So there's two sort of adjacent parallel evolution elements to that. The first is my mother was a teacher and she taught hearing impaired in Miami-Dade County for her entire career. And so education has always been very powerful for me because I look at it as an equalizer. Regardless of the various opportunities and advancements that people can have based on geography, me being born in the United States instead of Cuba, that changed my life trajectory. Based on socioeconomic status, if you are born with a trust fund, you're going to have different opportunities in life. But education affords you the opportunity to really elevate the prospects of what your career can hold. And so I've always been enamored with that, and I always wanted to be able to share the power that education can have with others. I got that from my mother. And then also just, sometimes there's a very rational side of things as well.
Mhm.
I was in a relationship at the time. I had my master's degree. I planned on becoming a professor and doing research and publishing books. But I didn't want to be apart from her at the time. So, what do you do with a master's degree in Gainesville, Florida? Well, teaching seems pretty good. And so I stumbled into it as a way to be a bridge for what was supposed to be a 3-year stint for that person's law school career. And then I stuck with it ever since.
Mm. Nice. Even though the relationship didn't.
The relationship didn't last, but
Yeah.
my passion for education did. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And so tell us a little bit about Zenith Prep Academy and what the company does, right? Because it's a SaaS company, a software
Yeah,
service company, and a lot of people don't, maybe if they're not in tech, don't understand what that means.
right.
Um,
And it's so funny because again, like you said, there's a lot of things that people look at with college counseling, and in fact, educating our parents is a big part of our initial process as well. Because families will come to us and say, "Okay, so you're going to connect me with a counselor, and they'll help me with the applications." Well, no, that's not what we do at all. Zenith's been around for a little under 20 years at this point. Started in 2007, and what we've done is really helped students identify their passion. And this is something you talk to almost any admissions officer now. It seems like common sense, but it's something that we were very fond of doing for a very long time, which is you don't just want to box check. You don't want to just say, okay, these are the things that get me into a good college. Because even if you did that, at the end of the day, and Jill, you know this better than almost anyone, getting into college isn't the end, right?
no.
Yeah, that's why I love running so much. There technically is no finish line. I love that about running. Running, you create a finish line, but there never has to be. And it's no different than our life journeys. Like people talk about lifelong learners nowadays. Well, there is no such thing as, oh, good, I finally stopped learning. No, even when you're in your career, at any point of your career, you should always be open minded to learning. And so, what we do is we help identify what that child's passion is. We don't just work with people in 11th or 12th grade, we work with students in 5th and 6th grade over multi year journeys. And after we help identify that with them, we really talk about, okay, what's an authentic way of building that? Right? Are you really into altruistic work with the environment? Lean into that. I had a student get into the University of Washington for engineering here this past year, and they wrote about Tinkerbell in their personal statement, right? I mean, but it was a beautiful written story. It had nothing to, because it was a huge part of that child's story, without going too much into it. And I think a really big part of what we do is really help students understand that there is no shortcut. There is no cutting corners. If you can just demonstrate longevity and passion, that more than anything else will help you stand out in the admissions process. And one of the final things that we do is external validation, because it's not just us saying that this student is great. It's not just you writing about yourself, whether it's professors, whether it's internships, whether it's unique opportunities through the relationships that we have at Zenith. It's all about making sure that they stand out in the applications process.
And
And we're
one of the things that I love about it, and this is what you kind of, I think you meant that I'm going to expand it just a little bit when you said it's not about checking the boxes, is that too many students are like, okay, I need to write this essay for this school, right? It has to be X number of characters to fit in their little
right,
boxes in the system. Or if they're using the universal app thing that some school systems allow.
correct.
And they're always like, so what do they want me to say?
Yes,
And it's like, it's not about that. It's about you being your own advocate and telling them something about you that makes you unique. And it's learning how to storytell at its most basic and best. And that's the part I find the most fascinating. It's not the, okay, well, what do they need to say to get to whatever the end goal is, right?
yeah,
Or
and it's
what
so
they think
funny.
is an end goal.
Exactly. I think that's the point right there. It's that it's don't. I've spoken with some leaders, whether they be secretaries of state or former generals, and really, really unique opportunities that have been afforded. And there's almost always a consistent theme. It's hard for someone who's 16 or 17 to know this, but when you are in sort of the middle or end of your career, you can reflect on this. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. We feel like we do when we're young, when we're 18 or 20 or 25. We feel like we have to earn it and that they have to say we're good enough. No, that's not true. And I think now more than ever, we're seeing it with some people who are ages 20 to 23, 24, coming out of college now. there is a different generational confidence in today's youth, and I love that about them. But I think the real important message is you don't have to change who you are in order to get what you want.
Mhm.
And the more you realize that, not only will that stress and anxiety fall away, but people will resonate with that. People can read that, hey, this isn't someone who's just trying to tell me what I want to hear. This is who they are. I may not agree with it
Mhm.
and I may not like them, but you know what? Then that
Mhm.
relationship was never meant to be, anyways. And that's one of the things that we stress with our students. It's not about trying to artificially create an acceptance to a particular, what is the right fit school? Someone going to Dartmouth or Brown is going to be very different than someone going to Stanford. Someone going to Stanford for business is very different than someone going to Harvard for business.
Yeah.
And so there's so many different unique ways of identifying that, but it's about educating the parents, educating the child, and really empowering them to identify who they are and help them to understand what it is that they're looking for.
And in understanding what the difference is with the schools they're applying to, so that they
Exactly.
know where they really fit, not just I want to apply to only Ivy League schools, when it's like
Correct.
you may be missing one that's not an Ivy League that would
Right.
be a much better fit for you.
Absolutely. I think that's a huge part of it as well. It's like at the end of the day, where you go to college is obviously very important. The professors, the people you interact with, the alumni association, the pedigree of the degree that you graduate, obviously.
Mhm.
But you have to love where you are. You have to really enjoy the programs that are there. So it can't just be because of the name of the university. There has to be an identity. There has to be a lot of these universities are looking for community fit.
Yeah.
They even ask about it in their supplemental essay questions. And so they are really looking to invest time and money on their end to ensure the people that they admit out of the several tens of thousands of applicants each year are a good fit for them as well.
Yeah.
And so, yes, there has to be a symbiosis there without a doubt.
Yeah. So you've had some like amazing, and Zenith has had some amazing opportunities lately, right? Like
Yes.
behind your head there, it says that you guys are subject matter experts on higher ed for the United Nations.
Right.
You just went to the World Economic Forum,
Correct.
and your founder got to speak there. Maybe
Yes.
you did too.
I
Did you
did.
speak
I
there?
had the fortune of speaking at the Abraham House. Yes, I did.
Yeah. And so talk to us about that. Like, how did you get invited to these things, and what did you say when you were there?
Yeah, absolutely. I thank you for the opportunity to share that. I think, it's funny. It actually is a microcosm of what we're trying to do with Zenith as a whole. Um, we're big believers at this company about relationships. And I think it's an interesting pushback against a lot of the surface level communications that we see across social media, across everything nowadays. You and I have talked about the brief interactions that people have on LinkedIn profiles, right? There's no depth anymore. And in fact, we tend to jump to more quick conclusions now than ever. And again, there's pros and cons to all of that, especially in a post AI world. But what I would say is what we really try to do is foster community within our company and relationships between our company and others. And so whether they be entrepreneurs, whether they be ministers, whether they be world leaders, everything that we're trying to do is say, hey, look, we're trying to impact youth. And our founder had an opportunity to speak at the Vatican with His Holiness the Pope. Why? Because youth and AI is a big part of his agenda. And it actually was so great because that's what I spoke about at Davos in the World Economic Forum. Really just talking about how the youth today are the guinea pigs of what training for an AI world will look like. And again, there's so much literature out there that the jobs of today are not going to be the jobs of tomorrow. That what people are learning in school and what people are studying today will be outdated by 2030. And there, again, the World Economic Forum releases a report on this annually, and there's so many other people conducting this research. But what we're trying to do is say, hey, at the end of the day, there's a human component here that will never be replaced. And if you can make good relationships with people as you progress in your own career, there's an opportunity for you to revisit those and say, hey, you know what? There's a person who's a professor at Johns Hopkins University on microbiology. Let's reach out to them. Maybe there's a collaboration there for one of our students. Or again, with the World Economic Forum, what started with our work with the United Nations opened the door for a conversation that eventually led to the World Economic Forum. And I guess the way I would say it is our resume that we do as a company and what I've been able to do as a president with the opportunities given to me, it's no different than a college applicant, right? Your resume as an adult helps open doors for you professionally. And so it's really, again, going back to that lifelong journey element of you never stop pushing, you never stop learning, and you always want to try and seek what's better. I don't know if you're a fan of Tennyson, but there's that quote at the end: "To strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield." That's a huge thing for me personally, and I think it's reflective of the work that we do professionally as well.
So, speaking of writers, one of your favorite books I read was Simon Sinek's "Leaders Eat Last,"
Yes.
and why that book?
Okay. The short answer is I don't know. The long answer is I I'm the type of person, people just call it servant leadership. There's so many
Yeah.
labels on
Hmm.
things. I struggle with labels because they put people in certain boxes. I
Yeah.
don't think it's that easy ever. I truly don't believe that you should ever ask anyone to do anything that you would not do yourself.
Mhm.
And I believe that in my personal life, and I believe that as a leader, and I believe that an employer. Um, and so even my own journey, I worked as a college consultant at Zenith, and then I was promoted, and then I worked in the front office with our sales team, and then I was promoted. So really, it was something about me having the opportunity to learn the whole business. And I say that because now, when I work with my team and I do all these meetings every day, I always want to basically say, how can I help? And it's a running joke with a lot of my leadership. That's like, Marcos is going to be the first person to volunteer, and we're always going to say no because he has enough on his plate. But the way that Simon Sinek wrote that book, and the reason why it resonates with me as a leader, is because if you can lead from the front in that way, it can inspire. At minimum, I'm not trying to be too cheesy with it, but I think it can at least inspire people to know that they're not alone in the work. And that's how I would say is that if my team is taken care of, my employees are taken care of, then my students and families are taken care of. And that's why I'm only on a 6-day consecutive journey for running and not a 6-month consecutive journey. Because there's times I need to step up and do more work. And I always want to make sure that my team feels supported in that regard. Does
Well,
that make sense?
yeah, absolutely. And you've also had kind of a crazy travel schedule from the start of this year on. So,
Uh,
with going to the World Economic Forum and other places.
yes.
Um, but I think that it's so important for leaders to understand all facets of their business that they're leading. And I love that you came in there doing various jobs, right?
Yeah.
And basically all of the positions that were possible. Maybe not the CFO job, but
Mhm.
it's uh,
My
and
CFO is great for that.
and your company it's fully remote, right?
We're
Yeah,
fully remote. We have people in, 3 dozen states and a few who live internationally as well. Yes.
yeah. So you work with families with kids in fifth grade and on
Yes.
mostly. You have new programs you're developing because it's not just about the getting those K-12 kids ready for college. But let's talk a little bit about the new programs that Zenith is rolling out. If you're willing to share any of them.
I would be happy to. And this is part of the reason why I haven't been able to run as much either. I talk to my leadership team every day almost. And we've reflected over the past few months in particular, the last year has been so transformative for our company. In many ways, we're not the same Zenith that we were. And what do I mean by that? Well, yes, originally it was students. Our company started in the Bay Area in California. We expanded across the country, but it's always been this idea of a one-to-one strategic model for the families and how we can build those profiles. In the last 12 months alone, we've started to work with a one-to-many program. So we call it the Essentials program. And there are a lot of students that maybe could not afford private counseling at $5,000 or $6,000 a year. And so what we did was we developed a model of these by grade level cohorts. So fifth and sixth grade is a cohort, 11th and 12th grade is a cohort. And we have a 12-month program that we've actually partnered with the United Nations. They actually give us a certificate, like delivered from the United Nations, revolving around the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the UN SDGs. And our program was built around that. So whether they're 11 to 12 years old or 17 to 18 years old, here's a program for you to be able to talk about soft skill development, organizational skills, aligning with the UN SDGs. There's so much great opportunities. And again, this goes back to the relationships that we have, and we've been able to do it at an affordable price point for families that, and again, I use this ad nauseum. I say this a lot. You could find an English teacher at your high school and ask them to tutor you at Starbucks every week. This program is cheaper than that. And it has the backing of our team, our experience for 20 years, the relationship we have with the United Nations, this certificate that they get. I mean, it's something that they can, again, use on their applications. We've had a couple of students who've experienced this program that have really grown into how they want to align with some of those SDGs in their own work. So it's been really, really great. And that's just one of them. We're also starting to work more with graduate school programs. We've had some students that have worked with us for so many years. They come back and say, well, can you help me with undergrad? Can you help me with grad school programs? And so we're now working on medical school applications. We've had some people reach out about doing law school and MBA program applications, which after we do this pilot program, I'm going to be instituting that in 2027. So a really, really great growth period for us as well.
That's wonderful. And you gave me chills with the kids and the UN certification, because I just think, like, how amazing is that to have that kind of global certification as a sixth grader or seventh grader saying, I went through this program, and
Exactly.
the doors that it could open.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. It's just, there's something about, again, this goes back to what we said at the beginning about education being the great equalizer. I envision Zenith where we have been as a college counseling company. I'm nothing if not ambitious, Jill. I want us to be a one-stop shop. If people are looking for child development, if people are looking for something that maybe doesn't fit in SAT, ACT prep, which we do, but there's other things. There's cognitive development. There's psychological assistance. There's so many ways that I think we can grow into that families can get that type of support. Because just like you and I are having a conversation from across the country, that's what technology has afforded us. The ability to bring talent and those who need talent and bridge them together. And that I'm really excited about, the limitless possibilities there.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. And I feel like it's, I'm a firm believer that you can never have too much learning about anything.
Agreed.
But being able to bring in opportunities to kids and let them try things will also help them understand what their passions are.
Exactly.
I think.
And that's funny because, knowing educators like I know you do, that's what they are. They're passionate about helping others.
Yeah.
And so it's a really great way for us to have so many, I call them former educators because they're educators in a different way, right? They're not in the classroom, et cetera. But so many of our team members were former teachers. And so they can have that same sort of altruistic, sacrificial passion that they have for helping others. And now they can do it on a much larger scale, which really helps in delivering the mission to our families because they care.
Yeah. And so how do the families find you?
So there's a number of different ways. Part of it is obviously like any company, we have advertisements that we do on social media platforms like YouTube, Google, Facebook, et cetera. But believe it or not, I would say like anywhere between 30 to 45% of our families come from word of mouth. They come from referrals. And we promote that. We would much rather say, hey, here's a family that enjoyed working with us. Do you have a neighbor? Do you have a family friend? We'd love to hear about what their needs are and see if we can assist them as well. And so it's something that we're trying to grow as well, especially now, again, over the last year and a half, with a very strong referral program, because we want to incentivize our families to be like, hey, if this is something that you know in your community, happy to help. And that helps us grow as well.
And you're not just, you're mostly US based now.
Yes.
But you wouldn't turn down a family from somewhere else that wants to go to US schools or other top schools around the world.
We have students in 9 countries at the moment, and we're constantly growing more. I had a conversation with a lovely professional who's based in the UK, and she works with about 45 or 50 students. But to your point, it was international students who are looking for US based. We met through a mutual relationship, actually. So this goes back to that element.
This is awesome.
And I'm planning on bringing her under our umbrella because it gives her access to our team. It gives us access to her families that she helps with because there is a need there. And one of my program directors, who is our sales team, they met with someone who was a little concerned in today's shifting climate. They are planning on coming here on an F1 visa. So they're moving to a state. They don't know if they're going to be able to have residency. How does that affect their applications? And that's where we can provide assistance. Hey, if you're in this state, if you have 36 months of consecutive residence, your child can graduate from a U.S. high school and they will be considered in state for that. That's happy to give that expertise to that family and help them navigate that process. So international students, absolutely. Maybe slightly more difficult currently for them, but it's something that we work with still.
Do you have people that are employed by you as the college counselors, or you call them specialists, right?
Yeah, so it's college.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of labels so much,
No,
but
I know.
college counselors, educational strategists is what we call them now.
Okay,
But
that's
they're
right.
basically, yes, basically the idea is they are the primary point person that they meet with on a regular basis with our families to ensure that we can provide our recommendations, we can check up on the student, on their progress, on the completion of the strategy that we recommend, and ensure that if there's any other support they need from our writing specialists or admission specialists, et cetera, that we can provide that to them as well.
How many languages do your specialists speak?
So right now we're serving families in 3 languages, which is a Mandarin official Chinese. Well, actually, do we have one in Cantonese? For sure, Mandarin, Spanish, and English.
Okay.
But again, we have French speakers, we have people who speak other languages as well. But those are the 3 languages that we've assisted families with currently.
Okay. Because I was thinking of, like, even if the child speaks English fluently, the parents may not speak as fluent of English in some cases.
Correct. And then to your point, part of our onboarding process is not just who's the counselor that's going to work with this family. We have a couple of meetings after they've agreed to work with us where we meet with the family and identify what their needs are. And part of that could be a language issue. Part of that could be a time zone issue. If we have a strategist living in Japan and the family living on the East Coast, do they have time to work together?
Yeah.
And vice versa. There was a student that was coming to us from Afghanistan, actually, a 10th grade young girl. So again, very limited opportunities for her to access the internet, making sure that we would have a time to be able to meet with them.
It's wonderful that you consider all those kinds of things. Yeah.
No stone unturned.
And I'm sure you've had to address the things as they've come up.
Yeah.
Too. What's one last thing you'd love for our listeners or viewers to know about either you or about Zenith Prep?
I think it goes hand in hand. Something, hopefully the people that have listened to this, and I really appreciate all of your audience taking the time to listen to this episode. There's no substitute for passion in life. I really, really don't believe there is. And no matter how rigorous the challenges can be, I think if you are truly caring about what it is you do, you'll find success. My father told me this. This is the work ethic I received from him. Marcos, when you grow up, you have to find 2 things. You have to find something that pays you money. There's the rational side of him. But find something you love, because he didn't. He found something that paid him good money. He didn't love it. And so I saw that growing up in my childhood. There wasn't that joy from year 5 to year 15 to year 30 with him in his career. And so he made good money. He provided for my family. Nothing can ever substitute that. But that was the opportunity that he, as a first generation immigrant, wanted to give to me. And something that now he is P-Pops, the grandfather to his grandchildren, he can display more of. Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Mm-hmm.
Once you can take care of the basic necessities, you can start taking care of the things that truly are important in life. And so for your listeners, whether they be young, whether they be professionals themselves, don't lose the passion for what it is you do, or find a way to rekindle it. And I think that speaks to what we do at Zenith as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Did your dad, is he retired now?
Oh, very, very much so.
And did he find things to do that he's passionate about in retirement besides hanging with the grandkids?
This is the thing that's the compulsion in him. He is miserable in retirement.
Oh.
You would think otherwise. I think, but my father runs. So sorry, I apologize. For the 90 minutes a day that he is jogging or running,
yeah,
he is in his bliss. He's done it every single day. So even though I've gone a lot further in my runs than he has never missed a day. Sick, injured, he still walks, he still jogs, he still runs. So, but that's the thing, that's that passion part. Other than that, he still needs to find something in his retirement.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it takes people a while.
It does.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time
to
be on the show. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing too.
And likewise, and I appreciate this opportunity, and I hope to get to be able to continue and speak with you and see where this goes.
Thank you.
Excellent.